Pick a memory from your childhood, something vivid, something you are certain happened exactly the way you remember it. Maybe it is a holiday, a fight your parents had, the day something went wrong at school, a moment that felt important enough to stick. Now consider this. The memory you just recalled is not the original event. It is a copy of a copy of a copy, and every single time you have remembered it, you have changed it, without knowing, without choosing, and without leaving any trace of the edit. The memory feels real because your brain built it to feel real. That is not the same thing as it being accurate. In 1974, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus ran an experiment that would spend the next 5 decades slowly dismantling everything the legal system, the therapy world, and ordinary people believed about how memory works. She showed participants filmed footage of car accidents and then asked them questions about what they had seen. The questions were identical in every way except for one word. Some participants were asked how fast the cars were going when they hit each other. Others were asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other. That single word, smashed instead of hit, changed the speed estimate significantly. Participants who heard smashed reported higher speeds. They also reported 1 week later seeing broken glass in the footage. There was no broken glass. The word had planted it. Loftus called this the misinformation effect, and it was just the beginning of what she would spend her career uncovering. In later studies, she went further. She implanted entirely false memories into research participants, memories of events that had never happened at all. In one version, participants were told by a trusted family member that as a child, they had once been lost in a shopping mall, had been found by a stranger, and had eventually been reunited with their parents. None of it had happened. About 25% of participants not only accepted the false memory, they elaborated on it. They added details, they described how frightened they had felt, they recalled the stranger's face. They remembered something that never existed. This is not a quirk of weak-minded people. It is how memory works in everyone. Memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain rebuilds it from scratch, pulling fragments from storage, filling gaps with inference, updating details based on everything you now know that you did not know then. The past gets quietly rewritten to fit the present every single time you visit it. Neuroscientists call this process reconsolidation. When a memory is retrieved, it briefly becomes unstable, malleable, editable, vulnerable to change. Then it gets stored again. Not as it was, as it is now, after the retrieval. The act of remembering is also the act of altering. This means that the memories you have revisited the most, the ones you have told as stories, the ones that feel most vivid and certain, are not your most accurate memories. They are your most edited ones. Every retelling adds something. Every retelling removes something. The confidence you feel about a memory is not a measure of its accuracy. It is a measure of how many times you have remembered it. And childhood is where this gets most complicated, because the memories formed earliest are the ones most handled, most reconstructed, most shaped by everything that came after. The story you tell about who you were as a child has been revised so many times by the person you became that the original is almost certainly gone. But here's what makes this harder to sit with. The revisions are not random. They follow patterns that researchers have now documented with uncomfortable precision. People consistently remember their past selves as more consistent with their current beliefs than they actually were. If you are politically conservative today, you're likely to remember being more conservative as a teenager than you actually were. If you change your mind about something important, you're likely to underestimate how different your earlier position was. The brain does not just forget. It retroactively rewrites the earlier version of you to make the story of who you are feel more coherent. This is called consistency bias, and it runs alongside a second pattern called fading affect bias, the documented tendency for negative emotional memories to lose their emotional intensity faster than positive ones. The pain of difficult experiences fades. The pleasure of good ones stays warmer longer. This is not wishful thinking. It is a measurable asymmetry in how emotional memory consolidates over time. Together, these two biases mean that the childhood you remember is almost certainly more emotionally coherent, more ideologically consistent, and more emotionally positive or more emotionally negative, depending on the story you need it to be, than it actually was. Your memory has been quietly editing your past into a narrative that makes sense of your present. Loftus spent decades testifying in courtrooms where eyewitnesses were certain, completely, unshakably certain, about things that forensic evidence proved they had gotten wrong. People sent to prison on the strength of memories that felt real but were reconstructions. People exonerated years later when the reconstruction was exposed. The confidence of the witness turned out to be completely unrelated to the accuracy of the testimony. They weren't lying, they were remembering. And remembering is not the same as knowing. Here's the part that changes how you read your own history. The memories you are most certain about are not more reliable, they are just more rehearsed. The ones that feel vivid and detailed and emotionally sharp, the ones you would stake something on, have been retrieved so many times that they bear almost no traceable relationship to the original neural encoding of the event. What you have is the last version, the most recent reconstruction, the one shaped by every conversation you've had about it, every photo you've seen of that period, every time someone in your family told the story slightly differently and your brain quietly updated its file to match. This doesn't mean nothing from your past is real. It means the past is not a place you can visit. It's a story you keep writing in the present, looking backward using the only tools you have, a brain that can't help but make things coherent, that can't help but smooth the edges, that will always trade accuracy for a narrative that holds together. The child you remember being was real. The memory of them is yours. Just understand that every time you've looked back at them, you've changed them a little, and so have they, quietly, without asking, changed you.